like to welcome you, all of you, on this platform during today's seminar. This seminar is a part of a huge initiative Dom Odbudowy Ukrainy, House of Reconstruction of Ukraine, which is also kind of a formula of such workshops and meetings, joining experts from Poland, but also other European and not only European countries, with our Ukrainian colleagues. Mostly with specialists who work with protection of heritage by the Ukrainian side. This platform, Dom Odbudowy Ukrainy, House of Reconstruction of Ukraine, is also an opportunity to share with contacts. So almost after every meeting, it's also an important input effort to our future cooperation. A few weeks ago, our friends from ALIPH Foundation, especially Maja Kominko, I'd like to welcome you very warmly, asked me if there is any opportunity to organize such a session. We've also contacted with Ministry of Culture of Ukraine. They were absolutely interested in sharing this opportunity. So this is why today we have such a seminar showing experiences from Liban, from Beirut, after 2020. I have to remind everyone that in 2020 there was an absolutely dramatic explosion in a port which destroyed the huge part of the city. And in the recent 2 years, our Lebanon friends, experts from Lebanon, did many efforts to reconstruct, to protect the heritage of the city. And today we want to share with this experience, especially because some of these destructions are similar to those who are right now in the Ukraine. And your expertise may help our Ukrainian colleagues to protect their own heritage in the face of Russian attacks. Even today, there is a huge, massive attack, more than 60 missiles just flowing over the Ukraine. This is maybe the reason that not everyone from Ukrainian side could join us, but we hope that our friends from Ukraine will just, those who are not joined already, will just come soon. Maya, I hope that the floor will be yours. I just want to announce that we have 3 presentations with a limited time, 3 presentations from Beirut, from Liban, and then discussion. Discussion is opened. If you want to take part in this discussion, please raise the hand and we'll give you a floor. This is right now the moment to say hello to everyone. It's really glad to see all of you. We have 32 participants already, and also some followers on the YouTube. Maya, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you so very much, Michał. I will like to give the briefest introduction and thanks to all, but let me just start that by saying that I have just literally now received a text message from Katarina Chujeva, the Deputy Minister of Culture. She apologizes, unfortunately, due to the missile attack this morning, she cannot reach the office and she doesn't have the internet connection, but she's very grateful to all of you speakers, to Michał and team in Warsaw for hosting this, and to speakers from Beirut. We will share with her the recording, of course. So I should probably have started by saying good morning. I'm Maja Kominko, Scientific and Programs Director at ALIPH, a foundation that works to protect cultural heritage in conflict and post-conflict areas. And I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues, Alexandra, Daryna, Elza, David, and Adonis. I would like to start by thanking Dom ODBUDOWY UKRAINY for hosting this seminar and colleagues from Beirut for their generosity in sharing their experiences. I think that this webinar is an example of solidarity with colleagues in Ukraine. We all recognize your dedication and your excellent work in extremely difficult conditions to protect cultural heritage in Ukraine. We at ALIPH are honored to have been able to support you since the beginning of the war, and we want to let you know that we will continue to support you for as long as you need us. And we are also proud of our cooperation with colleagues in Beirut, whose work after the explosion ensured rehabilitation, stabilization, and then rehabilitation of the heritage of the city. Their presentations include very practical lessons learned from this experience. And one important thing to note is, naturally, as difficult as the situation was after the explosion, they were able to work in the safe conditions of peace. But of course, Beirut was also marked by the war. And one of the speakers proposed to share the experiences from that period. We hope that the presentations will provide not only helpful practical indications, but also, almost as importantly, they will give hope for full recovery and healing after the war. And with that, I will hand over to my wonderful colleague, David Sassin, who at the time of the explosion worked in the Lebanese Ministry of Culture and was on the front line of the efforts on the ground. David will provide a short overview of the situation just for a few minutes, and then he will introduce the speakers with whom he worked on the ground in the aftermath of explosion. So thank you very much, and over to David.
Thank you, Maya. So as you probably have heard, I have been a part of the post-blast reaction in Beirut. I was working for the Ministry of Culture, so I will give an overview of the challenges faced from the managerial and logistical perspective. I will not go into the detail. I will just list the challenges, and this will give us the opportunity later to maybe have further discussions. So the objective after the blast was to have an emergency mindset, and was to have a quick reaction. And in the case of Ukraine, the additional objective is to remain safe, because this was the main difference. So the challenges, we will start with the legal and administrative procedures, because they are designed for normal times. And as you know, exceptional times need exceptional measures. So the need was to create exceptional procedures. And here I would also like to mention that even at ALIPH, a lighter procedure is adopted for the Ukraine action plan. So this is something we need to think about, how to have a balance between the two. Also, there is a similarity in the scarcity of resources. We are talking about human and financial resources compared to the actual need during crisis times. There is the energy constraints, lack of electrical power, and also in combustibles for vehicles. There is also the challenge to coordinate between the humanitarian need and the cultural heritage need, which is a challenge in war and also post-crisis times. And finally, in the case of Ukraine, unfortunately, we heard what happened this morning. There's the daily exposure to war-related threats, which is an additional constraint or challenge that has to be faced. I'll be very quick. I will finish my parentheses on the role, let's say, of public institutions in crisis or post-crisis management. And I would really like to highlight that this recovery wouldn't have been successful without the solidarity and proactiveness of private initiatives and the civil society. And that's why today we are having interventions by 3 Lebanese professionals who work together in the post-blast recovery. I will leave the opportunity to our speakers to further introduce themselves, since they have been collaborating in different ways: consultants, contractors, civil society activists. I will give a brief introduction of the topic and also the intervenants. So first, we will start with architect Fadlallah Dagher, who's going to highlight the main challenges of stabilization during the war. Then we will have engineer Michel Chalhou, who's going to give a focus on the technical and engineering aspects of the 2020 post-blast stabilization works. And finally, architect Nathalie Shaheen will share her experience in mobilizing resources for rapid stabilization, winterization, and the post-blast recovery. Thank you very much, and I leave the floor to, I think the first speaker is architect Fadlallah.
Hello all. Thank you, David. Thank you, Maya, for introducing me. My name is Fadlallah Daher. Everybody calls me Fadlo. I'm living in Lebanon. I'm an architect and one of the founders of the Beirut Heritage Initiative after the port blast in 2020. I've been working a lot on heritage. First of all, I want to express my deepest concern and my deepest solidarity with the Ukrainian people, with the times they are living. In Lebanon, we know what it is to be living in times of war. We've been living this for 50 years now. Since 1973, the first eruptions of violence started in Lebanon, and we know how hard it is. Of course, what you Ukrainian people are living today is much more violent as well, because the weapons that are used by the Russian army are of course much more damage. They create much more damage than what we had at our scale. I will start by sharing my screen, and I hope everybody will see it. So to start with my presentation, I will be talking about my experience. I'm a little bit older than my colleagues, so I lived the war in Lebanon, the civil war first, and then the aftermath of the civil war, what we call the reconstruction time, where whatever was destroyed by the civil war was supposed to be either protected or reconstructed. So the civil war in Lebanon actually started officially in 1975, and it ended in 1990, although really it still goes on today, but on a different level. So we had a civil war inside on the Lebanese territory, plus invasions from the Israeli and Syrian armies, coupled with bombing, severe bombings on the civilian population and civilian neighborhoods. Of course, nobody was prepared for that. You are never prepared for such an aggression. And of course, at the time in 1975, nobody was even thinking of heritage protection or whatever measures that could be taken. Violence is still affecting the country today because Lebanon is still going through political unrest, terrorist attacks, Israeli invasions and bombing like in 1996 or 2006. And of course, everything culminated in the massive blast at the port of Beirut in August 2020, which is mainly provoked. We don't know the reasons today officially because there is no investigation, proper investigation going on. However, we know that it is due to incompetence of the politicians in Lebanon. For nearly 5 decades, nearly 50 years, the Lebanese population has been living in this situation and has learned to survive despite the total lack of action from the institutions. Little by little, the civil society has reacted and has formed and has been forced to react to the absence of the public services and the government authority. This shows you a picture of Beirut in 1983 during the war, in the middle of the war. Of course, with always a message of hope, because life, despite the war and despite destruction, hope is always here and life goes on. So violence actually in Lebanon erupted in different areas, leading to massacres, exile, and destruction. And of course, you are never prepared to that. You never know where violence is going to erupt. You never know how you have to react to that. There was no coordinated action to protect, stabilize, or consolidate buildings or built heritage even, because at the time we were not prepared. The government also was not prepared for that. And the population even was not prepared and organized as a civil society or as NGOs at the time. There was no specialized personnel, of course, to help civilians, and there was no, of course, as well material for that. So through 15 years of dynamic war, when I say dynamic, it means that it's unexpected, it moves around on the territory. There has been no action at the institutional level to safeguard heritage. Monuments and neighborhoods were left to fall down, and the monuments, the public buildings and monuments were occupied, were sacked by the militias, the local militias. So we didn't even have the possibility as civilians to go in and try to do anything there. So dwellers, people who were living in those buildings, they did what they could with the little means they had. Actually, in some areas, there were massacres and people had to leave their homes, and probably the buildings were destroyed, built down, taken down to the ground. But in other neighborhoods that were just bombed by the local militias or mobbed by the Syrian army or by the Israeli army, whenever the bombing stopped, we were able to clean, at least repair minor to medium scale damage. And when we say repair, it was not repaired up to whatever was technically acceptable. It was just, quick repair, just to be able to still go on living in those houses with whatever means we had at the time. And the process went along. Many buildings were hit many times. I can say from my own experience that our family house in Beirut, which is a heritage house, was hit repeatedly during the war. And since the time I was 15, I've been used to react to those bombings by cleaning, repairing, safeguarding as much as possible our family home and, of course, other homes in the neighborhood. The main, why we did that was that we didn't want to lose the house we were living in, and we had to repair it as soon as it was hit, whenever it was possible. And really, if you leave the house, if you leave the building, then yes, eventually, probably it will fall down eventually. So really, the fact that quick action is done, it's always a good thing in order to protect and in order to safeguard the buildings. The response to those bombings were hence localized and led by immediate needs. And mostly it was undertaken by unskilled workers. When I say unskilled, I was one of those unskilled workers at the time, the population living in those buildings. And there was no proper equipment and no experience at all in this. But of course, through 15 years, you eventually learn little by little and things get organized and people, they react as much as they can. This is a picture from the bombing of the southern suburbs of Beirut in 2006 by the Israeli army, which is similar to what you are living today in Ukraine. So what could have been done and what can we do today in Ukraine if we want really to help people? First of all, of course, we have to mobilize. So people have to be prepared to react as soon as they can, as soon as the bombing is over, to react and move on the ground. The authorities, they can supply first aid kits, what I can call first aid kits for building material in every threatened neighborhood, like scaffolding, like propping material, tarpaulin, which are large nylon plastic covers for the roofs, corrugated aluminum panels also that can be used for the roofing, light material that can be really very fastly reintroduced on the site to protect. Of course, we need timber beams, nylon rolls, whatever can be of use to close windows, to reinforce punctually and in a fast way. Then, of course, it's important to identify potential group leaders amongst the population in each neighborhood. you need, of course, some professionals to be doing that and to be leading the groups, like retired engineers, retired architects, who can have the technical expertise and can lead groups of energetic teenagers, because we know that most of the population, the men, etc., are engaged in the war. But people who are not engaged yet in the war, like teenagers or elderly retired professionals, they can definitely help in this salvation project. The population should be informed on the availability of materials for urgent propping and sheltering. They should be informed that the material is there available, and there are people who can give the expertise, so they should be aware of all of this. And mostly, of course, also these retired experts, they could start establishing a survey of heritage buildings in each city, in each village, in each area that is bombed, or before it is bombed, you know. A survey, it can be just a photographic survey, just a listing of those buildings, and start building archives, just to say, by priority, if there is any bombing, how can we protect before the bombing, and after the bombing, if the buildings are hit, how many buildings are hit, which one do we protect first? There are priorities to be set very urgently. What not to do, and this is the major lesson we have learned in Beirut, because as I was telling you, during the 15 years, we were working mainly on safeguarding private homes. The public buildings were invaded or occupied by militias or by the Syrian army or by the Israeli army, so we were not able to intervene there. But we learned after the war was over officially, when the reconstruction process started, the Lebanese government started then demolishing the center of the city of Beirut, was practically brought down to the ground. Villages were destroyed, and the excuse that were used at the time is that this is destroyed, we have to take it over, take it down, and rebuild a new neighborhood. The problem is that here we lost the social fabric, of course, because people were taken out of those buildings. We lost the heritage buildings, which were not protected at the time. And eventually, the center of the city of Beirut, for instance, was reconstructed. Many villages were reconstructed, injecting a lot of money, but all these areas lost their soul. The city of Beirut today, the center of the city of Beirut, is a ghost town, and the memory of the city is lost. So this is essential to keep in mind, that whatever happens, yes, we can afterwards, even if we were not able to protect those buildings during the war, after the war, it's important to try and save whatever we can save the memories, save the places. This is how Beirut was demolished after the war. As you can see, it looks like a movie scene, like people are sitting in those chairs and buildings are being exploded, brought down to the ground. And these were really heritage neighborhoods, the heritage fabric of the old city of Beirut. And here you can see this man is showing a picture of what the piazza he's standing on looked before the war and how it looked after the war during destruction of the city, destruction of those buildings. So as a conclusion, I would say that war is similar. It's violence all around. Yet today, the massive weapons and level of destruction in Ukraine cannot compare with that of Lebanon in 1975, where local militias and really smaller weapons were used. The only thing that can compare is, of course, the massive bombings of organized armies like the Syrian army, who uses a lot the same strategy as what the Russian army is doing, you know, destroying before moving on, and the Israeli army as well, using planes, air bombing, etc., that is very destructive. The level of destruction is globally much higher in Ukraine than it used to be in Lebanon before 1990, where major destruction occurred. In Lebanon, the major destruction occurred after the end of the war, through the so-called reconstruction process in Beirut and in Mount Lebanon. And this reconstruction wiped out the memory through the destruction of heritage and urban fabric. Following the lack of proper response from the authorities in Lebanon over 4 decades, the population has been driven to take care of itself, and the civil society has taken an effective role on the ground. So actually, it took us 40 years to start organize as a civil society in Lebanon, because we always were hoping for the government to react, for the government to organize, and to start really doing things the proper way. But up until today, nobody is doing that. So the civil society has organized, NGOs, non-government organizations have organized. And after the Beirut port blast in 2020, it's the civil society response that really helped people out. And it was driven by the will to preserve the urban heritage and the social fabric of the city, because the areas that were hit were the last areas of Beirut where the population was living in a social fabric and an urban fabric that was still carrying the spirit of the city. And it was really in contradiction and unlike what the authorities had done after the civil war in Beirut. So I come here to the end of my small presentation. I hope it is useful. Of course, again, I'm saying in times of war, it's very difficult to react, but we can prepare and we can at least salvage whatever is possible. And what's mostly important is to be prepared for the aftermath of the war. Afterwards, what do we do? Do we wipe out or do we preserve the memory, whatever it costs? Thank you. And of course, I'm available for any question that you might have later on.
Thanks a lot, Fadlo. So next presentation will be carried out by engineer Michel Chalhoub, who is going to give a more focus on the technical and practical measures on buildings in terms of structural retrofit. Michel?
Yes, David, thank you.
All right.
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet for me.
Yes, we see just, right now. It's okay. You can see.
So thank you so much, David, for the introduction. And also thank you, ALIPH, for inviting us to this seminar. I would repeat what Fadlo said before, that to express our solidarity with the Ukrainian people because of this war. I'm Michel Chalhoub. I'm from Lebanon, the founder of District Solutions, a design, build, and research firm specialized in the built heritage, restoration, and retrofitting. I had also the opportunity to be a member of Beirut Built Heritage Rescue in 2020, and I coordinated the assessment unit. I will try to cover in this presentation, the technical part of the stabilization and sheltering mission after the Beirut blast for the built heritage in Beirut. I will start by the scope and the context. Then I will move to a comparison between the built heritage models in Beirut and in Ukraine. Then I will move to the stabilization action plan. And before the conclusion, I will talk about the technical interventions. It is worth mentioning that the content of this presentation is based on the cumulative work of the BBHR, the Beirut Built Heritage Rescue in 2020, and the private work of District Solutions. So after the blast, hundreds of historic buildings were damaged by the blast. Many of them were facing the risk of collapse or what we call near to collapse problem. So it was mandatory to plan for an urgent stabilization and sheltering mission in this regard. why it is maybe interesting to share this experience with the Ukrainian professional team, because when I was like reviewing the photos communicated to us by the Ukrainian colleagues, I found several similarities on this level. We talk first about the similarities of the observed damages. Here we can see like a collapse, comparable collapse, like a corner that collapsed in a built heritage in Beirut and in Ukraine. Also, for example, we can notice the similarity in, for example, the demolition of a part of the facade in a historic building, and also a massive destruction of a building, like a big part of a building was collapsed because of the blast. Also, I noticed some similarities in terms of the structural system typologies. Here, for example, in the Beiruti houses, the main element was like the bearing walls made up of sandstone. And I noticed that in the Ukrainian part, like they use also the stones or the stone blocks and also the brick blocks. So there was some similarities, and maybe it is worth to compare these similarities and try to adopt the same measures that we made here in Lebanon after the blast. So I'll move now to the stabilization action plan. Around 40 architects and structural engineering restorer were mobilized under the umbrella of the Directorate General of Antiquities, Ministry of Culture, for this mission. Many units were created to do this job. So for instance, the documentation and digitalization unit, the structural assessment and stabilization, and I had the opportunity to coordinate this unit. And for example, the supervision unit to make sure that the propping, sheltering will be done correctly for these buildings. In fact, the damage area of the capital, Beirut, was like divided into multiple zones. For each zone, a structural assessment was done, and because of the huge volume of the work or the multiple damage buildings, it was necessary to make or to create some structural assessment forms to automate the work. And here, for example, like a specimen of these forms, taking into consideration, for example, the typology of the building, the structural system of the building, the typology of the structural system, the typology of the damages, and so on. And accordingly, the building was like assessed like having a severe damage or a moderate damage or a minor damage. And I'm showing here to the bottom left a macro scale damage assessment for the city, and a micro scale to the right, to the bottom right, a micro scale damage assessment telling us, for example, the red buildings are severely damaged and so on. So at the end, the typologies of the damages were like classified, and for each typology or for each type of damage, like guidelines were created. So anyone who read this document can have an idea about what to do in this case. For example, to the right, we show like the collapse of the triple arch, which is typical in the Beiruti houses. I will move, for example, to the corner detachment, where we gave, for example, like a recommendation in a tie rod system or a confinement belt to maintain these corners. Like here, we are talking about like wall bulging or like losing some peripheral walls on the top of the building. This was like repetitive. We saw it in many buildings. And accordingly, we made this classification, and we could do or classify the typology of the damages that occurred in Beirut. Here I show also some cases of like deflected ceilings or like damaged attics, how to cover, what to do. So this was done like in a systematic way to prepare like a private initiative. How should they intervene in case they have a similar case in their work. I will move now to the field work, and it was necessary to use like simple tools and available materials and equipment. And we know very well that because of the crisis, the economical crisis, so we had like a shortage of materials and tools and equipment. For instance, we used the steel tie rods. They were used to stabilize the detached walls, for example. We used the wooden and the steel beams in the process of propping, slab supports, bracing. We used the lime, and here I'm showing like an exported lime, but we use also the local lime, which is very interesting to use in the case of cracks. We make some injection in the cracks just to avoid water infiltration, because water is really a harming parameter for a built heritage building. And the main element in this work was the steel props or the propping system. It was used to support the slabs and also to distress the walls, because our walls were like fragile, and maybe a potential collapse was foreseen for in any case of extra load. So they were used also to distress these walls and avoid like a potential collapse. The material sorting and the cleaning part was really very important because from the sorting point of view, it was necessary to do this job or this task in order to collect the materials that will be reused in the phase of restoration or rehabilitation. So here we show like stone blocks, like fences, like decorative wood elements like corbels, cornice, marbles, marble columns, windows and doors. This part was really very important to do because it will help to also have this memory of the building or the trace of the architectural elements, so we can do similar or we can reuse them in the future restoration. I will move to the sheltering part, and this was really urgent because before the winter time, because as we know that water is really the first enemy in a built heritage building, and it will cause a lot of decays and damages. First, we start by some decays. At the end, we end by structural damages due to water infiltration and weakness of structural elements. So we had the opportunity to use like mainly two solutions. The first one was for example, the corrugated sheet covers, especially when the attic were like very damaged. And to mention, these attics were made up of like wooden elements, wooden structural elements, and covered by red tile in red tile elements. So here I show like 2 or 3 applications. One of them, I think that ALIPH was involved in this bottom right example, which is Cochrane Palace in Beirut. This was one of the solutions. The second solution was like the flexible solution, which is quicker to install, but needs some maintenance to be maintained. I'm showing some flexible tarpaulin here, like the details, how to fix them, and the end product was like this one. Here I have like 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 examples, and to the bottom left and in the middle, I'm showing, for example, a damaged attic before and after it was covered by this flexible system to avoid water infiltration. I will move to the openings. It was really very urgent to install like a strangling system for these openings, to maintain the stiffness of the wall, the in-plane stiffness of the wall, because our walls were like really fragile due to the cracks because of the blast, and it was really necessary to introduce the system to make a stiffer wall so it can handle the loads. And after that, we covered the windows by flexible also covers, nylon or tarpaulin or whatever, or plastic, also to avoid water infiltration. I will move to the main part related to the bearing elements, and here I'm showing two main typologies of damage, like the in-plane damage and the out-of-plane failure mechanism. And in some cases, we had both in one wall. So to maintain the building from collapse, lot of bracing system were introduced. Also, we used as I said before, the injection for the cracks, not to have water infiltration. We used the tie rod system, the lateral braces here, for example. So in many cases, and for example here I can show like regular rebars used in the concrete, reinforced concrete work, because we had a lack, for example, for the tie rod, the properly set tie rod system. So it was like an artisanal work, like created by the engineers or even the owners of the built heritage in Beirut. Here also I'm showing like how do we reconstruct some collapsed wall on the peripheral facade. And this was like really important to do to ensure a lateral bracing of the remaining existing walls. And after this mission, it was also important to cover this new structure by also like flexible or flexible system to avoid this water effect from damaging the building. As for the slabs, the deflected slabs, the only way was like to prop the system. And I repeat that this system had a double objective. The first is to maintain, to support the damaged ceiling, especially, for example, here we had like very beautiful ceilings called Baghdadi, and they are so fragile. And it was like very urgent to intervene in terms of propping. Some measures were taken to protect also the tiling system. And I repeat that this intervention aims to support the slabs and also to distress the bearing walls from and to avoid future collapse. Well, as a conclusion, I repeat that the elaborated stabilization work was mainly due to the efforts of the civil society and private initiative and volunteer architects and structural engineers. And here the DGA, or the Directorate General of Antiquities, had a big role to do on the managerial part and coordination part and logistics. I repeat also that simple tools and equipments and materials and available materials on the local market were used. And I will end by my presentation by showing this really severely damaged case in Beirut. It is well known for the Chilean team that visited this building and the famous dog. Also, I don't know if you know this history about this case. Just to say that whatever is the level of damage in a historic building, okay, we can save it. And this is a message also for the developers and for whomever is thinking to maybe abuse in such critical cases, saying that, okay, the building is severely damaged, let's collapse it and let's make a new building or a model building, contemporary building in its place. So hopefully I could cover this technical part. Thank you for your attention, and I will be ready also to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michel. Finally, we will finish with architect Natalie Shaheen, who will lead us through a presentation on the challenges and good practices in terms of resource mobilization in crisis management. Natalie?
Yes, thank you, David. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So, sorry. So I'm Natalie Shaheen. I'm an architect restorer, and I was part of the initiative BBHR of 40 heritage experts who joined the DGA after the blast to save Beirut heritage. I would like to thank ALIPH, and I would like to salute our Ukrainian colleagues. We stand by you, and we admire your will and your resistance. So, and we are ready to help in any way we can. I'm going to talk about the experience of the post-blast in Beirut, about the challenges, and I will leave it to you to relate to our experience and to take whatever can help you out of this experience. So I think the major challenge that we both, you are still facing and that we faced after the explosion was the challenge to lose the heritage houses and to lose the city's identity. Basically, some people would say, oh, how do you care about saving heritage while life of people is in danger? So there is a certain, let's say, struggle. People are dying. Why we care about heritage? Well, I think everybody, and this is what we have done after the blast, was helping in the way he could. There were people helping in the social aspect. We as experts thought that this is where we can help the most, and this is where our expertise could be useful. The actors and frame of every action that can take place. I think the key word is to join forces. No one can work by himself in a crisis situation, in times of crisis. In our situation, it was really an example of joint forces between the governmental institution, the one in charge of the heritage in Lebanon is called the DGA. It works under the Ministry of Culture. And for us, as heritage experts and BBHR experts, we trusted this institution. It was an institution which was not corrupted. And the people there were professional people, but they lacked of resources because there were only 2 architects for the whole country. So this is why we created our operational unit of heritage experts, and we stood by them. Such let's say, initiative would need international organizations, and they stood as well by us, like ALIPH, UNHCR, UNESCO, UNICEF, etc. The NGOs, so the social, the civil society is a must in such cases because they can mobilize people. They should have resources, and they are really a very strong backup to such initiative. For example, the Beirut Heritage Initiative was a very efficient after the blast, and they are still doing works like reconstruction and rehabilitation works. Universities, contractors, inhabitants, orders, and syndicates like engineering, orders of engineers, etc. Just a small explanation about our unit of heritage experts. Right after the blast, we were 40 heritage experts to unite our efforts and to create this unit. And when we say unit, that doesn't mean that we had a place to meet. Actually, I don't think, and we should confirm that we were 40, but we never met all together. We were divided into small groups. We were mobilized virtually, so we were communicating via social media platforms. We didn't have a place together. We didn't have a place to work, but nevertheless, we were able to produce results. The same day, we created via Google a social media platform, and this is very useful because on the third day, we were joined by 200 architects and architecture students who were in charge of, let's say, several missions. I'm going to explain them later on. The major challenge was the lack of adapted toolkits and means. None of us was prepared to such an experience, but we were all engineers and architects. We had our logic and we had our experience, so we put our own guidelines with our own system. It's important to establish a logic work frame and to learn from similar experiences. Here I have put 2 links for a handbook and a toolkit prepared by IKROM for first aid to cultural heritage in times of crisis. They can be very useful and they can be downloaded online. The second thing is if there's not many things are available, we use what is available and what we disregard. We should not be blocked in what is not available. Let's focus on what is available and let's use it. And the third point, to use social media platforms, as I already said, for communication. One should define the phases because, as I said, the work should be systematic and logic. For the Beirut experience, first we had to decode, we had to find and identify the heritage buildings. I don't know about the situation in Ukraine, but in the case of Beirut, there was no map that we could use where all the heritage buildings are indicated. So this, I don't know if it is available in Ukraine, but if it is not available, I think it is time to start producing such maps whenever the situation is calm in order to facilitate later on any assessment action. So the second phase would be to assess the situation and check the level of damage, and then to intervene. And after the intervention, during the intervention, to record and document the whole process. The zoning is very important. You know, the 40 did not work at the same spot. So we divided the areas and we subdivided the areas even, because the first division was, okay, we were 40 experts. We had with us 200 architects and students, so they're not really heritage experts. We gave them the areas that were not really affected by the explosion, but of course they were monitored from far by one of the experts, one of the 40, and the 40 took in charge the areas that are indicated in red and orange, so the areas right in front of the blast, because some buildings, as Michelle already showed, were really under an imminent risk of collapse, and an expertise was needed to see if one can access or not access, how to access the site. Another kind of working system is needed. Not everybody can do everything, so it's good to divide the tasks between groups. We had 15 groups operating on the ground. Another thing that we adopted was the horizontal hierarchy. So because sometimes bureaucracy or hierarchy block the work, so you need flexibility to be able to operate, not to have one chef or one leader or whatever you name it. We needed this hierarchy to keep the flexibility, to keep the decision making, and to take the decision right on the spot without having to go through a system that is complicated. We set the priorities. For us, the priorities was the urgent propping, the sheltering, and the resettlement of the people to bring back the social fabric, because after all, it is true that we cared about the heritage, but we cared more about the people who lived in those houses. So the purpose was not only to save the houses, but to bring back the people. It's good to make a kind of guidelines for the field work. For example, in our case, we created a kind of matrix where we put the level of damage versus the typology of the house. And this gave us a kind of pricing, an idea of the pricing that would every house require for the full rehabilitation at the later phase. Using available virtual communication media like WhatsApp. We function via WhatsApp, although it looks not professional, but I think it functioned well. For example, if an architect would see, or a student or an engineer would see that there is a house really with a risk of collapse, he will directly, immediately indicate it on the WhatsApp group. The engineers under Michel in this group will go directly to check the house, to set the propping method, and then the coordination with the contractor will follow, and the contractor will come and will do the propping under the supervision of Michel's team. It was a practical way, no need to take risks and move to meet. So the WhatsApp was very practical. To collect the data and sort it from home or office, like you see in the map, this map was gathered and collected in the evening. So let's say offices, houses, whatever. So all the data was put on one map in the evening, waiting for calm days to assess. And all concerned parties are informed at once via those WhatsApp groups. So you don't have to go and inform everybody of the situation. Once you put the picture and the number of lot, everybody in this group will be informed. I won't explain those slides because they were already explained by Michel, but this was the way to assess, to prop, and to shelter. Michel already explained using basic and available materials. Don't go for complicated systems. Use what you have. Use the fastest and the most efficient method, and maintain whenever possible, because a propping is not eternal. So whenever it is possible, go check it if the metal is still fine, if the wood is still fine, and using all possible resources. The picture I'm putting on the right is a common, let's say, initiative between the French Unifil Army and the Lebanese Army to save the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs building. A very important point, Fadlo already talked about it, is the documentation. And I would say the documentation is a preventive measure, because you document the house, you would never know what would happen to it. So it's a way to prevent losing the data if something happens. And this is at the moment where I would say it's important to involve students, because students at universities are a big, major task force. They want to serve the country. This is the way they could serve the country. And it has a benefit on them, because they will have to learn about their heritage and later on to be part of the team saving it. This is another initiative where the students were involved to save 3 palaces, the artifacts of 3 palaces. They were trained and they did the inventory of all the collapsed items. Finally, the inhabitants, sometimes they clear without any guidelines. So we prepared kind of the guidelines to tell the people, okay, when you clear, beware if you find historical elements, put them aside, don't throw this, don't do that. And this is very important to do. Manuals with the BHE were prepared, workshops, minor interventions guideline just to guide the people and the NGOs in their minor interventions actions. Finally, this is really the hard time for you. We can feel it. We know it from the news. But I think out of this this situation, strongest souls will emerge, and you will be able, we hope, to save your heritage and to save your country. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Natalie. I think we finished the presentation sessions. I hope it was the information were relatable with what our Ukrainian colleagues and professionals are facing. Maya, would you like to say something, or maybe with Michal we can go to the question?
I just thank you so much, David, and thank you so much, the speakers, for these wonderful, helpful, and inspiring presentations. I will hand over to Michal for questions.
Yeah, I think that there is a time for questions, but I also want to add something. One comment at first. I would like to thank you, all of you, for this really great presentations, and they are really helpful for us, for Ukrainian partners. And what comes to me after I watch it is that there is, and it's really important that there is always a time to protect the heritage, even in spite of some obstacles or circumstances, and sometimes some ways that seem to be easier and faster, like replacing the old buildings with the new ones, which is sometimes also very might be very interesting for even for politicians. But there's still a time, and always time, to fight for heritage, and also to use, regarding what Natalie said, to use all these materials that are just available at this moment. So not waiting for the proper moment, not waiting for even for the help from outside, but just starting. So I think this is time for discussion. If someone wants to ask the question, please raise your hands, and I will give you a floor. I will just remind you that we're raising the hand not on a photo, but with the button. There is some button reaction, and then you can just click raise a hand.
And Michal, if I may, maybe you can add that please feel free to ask questions in Ukrainian, and they will be translated into.
Of course. I mean, please remember that we have a full translation.
Oh.
Yeah, Victoria Didenko.
Доброго дня, колеги. Я щиро дякую, що запросили на цю зустріч. Дуже дякую, пан Міхал, Майя, всім доповідачам, архітекторам та інженерам, Лівану. Дуже змістовна і цікава доповідь. Я би хотіла запитати, наскільки я розумію, пан Фабло, якщо я не помиляюся, говорив про те, що владі не дуже було цікаво на той момент, в якому стані знаходяться їхні об'єкти культурної спадщини. І мене цікавить, чи не було від влади якихось таких нюансів, які відбуваються зараз у нас в Україні з законодавством, які ускладнюють процес навіть цього збереження об'єктів культурної спадщини. Тому що, якщо брати до уваги, що наші колеги з Лівану користувалися тими інструментами і матеріалами, які були у них в наявності і під руками, ну, звичайно, крім того, що у людей є, нічого іншого вони використати не зможуть. У нас до останнього там заборонялося міняти шибки, скло. Ну, це дуже складний процес. Чи виготовляти треба було так само документацію, чи це просто в авральному такому порядку проводилися якісь роботи і приймалися якісь вольові рішення? Дякую.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there are many questions in one question. First of all, let me talk about the essential material question. During the war, it's very difficult to replace any material with the authentic, in the authentic way. So what we have done in Lebanon in times of war was, first of all, for the windows to replace with nylon sheets. So use whatever pieces of wood we could to create a frame, and nylon sheets to protect from the wind and from the cold. Of course, it's not optimal, but you have to do with whatever you have at hand. That was really the simplest way possible, who every person could do. So that was very easy to do and very urgent, because you need to protect the interior of the house if necessary. Then filling in walls with whatever materials also was available, any stones, any concrete or cement masonry units, even plaster boards, even aluminum sheets. Whatever was available was good enough to close whatever opening was done in the walls by the destruction. So first of all, it's a question of protection. Whenever you protect the building or you protect yourself, it prevents more damage by the weather, by weather conditions, snow or wind or rain or whatever. Of course, also you need to protect from dust as much as possible, because it's not just the buildings that need to be protected, but whatever is inside the buildings, which is essential. Now, in terms of legal measures or legal tools to protect the heritage, that was not existing in Lebanon during the war. And just after the war, and while the destruction was going on in Beirut for the reconstruction process, the Ministry of Culture initiated at the time the reflection, the thinking on what should be done and where and how can you define heritage, what is heritage and what is not. It's not just monuments, it's not just public monumental buildings, it's not just old, very old buildings, but heritage is actually a living entity. It's today, globally, in most countries, we consider heritage as being whatever has been built 50 years ago. So 5 decades ago could be considered heritage. Even modern buildings, of course, are considered heritage as well. And this is still, in Lebanon, is still debatable, because the authorities have not taken the measure of what they want to really specify as heritage, and we don't have the tools up until today. However, after the explosion of on the 4th of August in Beirut 2020, the parliament made a decision which is to consider the areas that were hit by the blast as areas under protection. And in order to protect what they called protect heritage and protect the population, they came out with a measure that prevents selling your property in these areas. So people are not able to sell their houses to any developer that would come and benefit from the fact that those buildings were demolished or hit by the blast, and take them, demolish them, and build new buildings instead. This is where actually this is controversial as a measure, because it's not really a protective measure for heritage. So I think in Ukraine, the situation is different, because you have a central government that is quite present and that can take those measures fast. I hope that activists can really urge and push the government to take decisions in order to protect heritage. But I don't know if you have the tools to identify what is heritage already, yes or no. Over.
So I also have a question.
Thank you. Дякую.
Referring to what you've said, because sometimes it happens in Ukraine right now that those buildings who are not being protected yet, but they are old, pretty old, 100 years, for example, and have been destroyed, are being replaced by authorities because it's much more attractive for authorities just to replace them with something new, much easier. And of course, there is some kind of a system of protection, but it's something beyond this problem also. So my question is, did you take care also of these buildings that haven't been protected before? I mean, the old ones, but not officially protected.
Practically whatever you saw on the images shown by Michelle and Natalie are unprotected buildings. Okay, the only protection that was given to those buildings were given by the owners. They protected their own houses by not demolishing them. But as an official protection from the government, no, there is still no law to protect this specific heritage of Lebanon. Whatever is protected in Lebanon are all the buildings that are built before 1700, so that are 300 years old. But you can imagine that the 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century are not officially protected by any specific law. Up until today, there are projects that are waiting at the parliament to be voted on, but listed buildings today are not included within whatever is damaged, and what we consider as experts, we consider heritage, but legally it's not yet considered as heritage.
Okay, thank you. Lilia Nyszczenko, then Anna Łopuska. Pani Lilio? Pani Lilio, słychać nas? Can you hear us?
Так.
Okay.
Так. Дякую дуже. Дякую колегам з Бейруту, дякую Майя, дякую Міхал за таку можливість почути, власне, то, що нам дуже цікаво і актуально. Я представляю Львів, місто в Україні, яке є в ЮНЕСКО. А я маю такі 3 коротенькі питання. У чиїй власності були ці будівлі, які ви нам показали, які були зруйновані? Хто фінансував ці роботи захисту? І чи протягом 2 років, від 2020 року, ви відбудували якісь з цих будівель? Дякую.
I answer? Okay, so for example, our initiative of BBHR, it was a volunteering initiative, so no funds were needed. For the propping, most of the contractors offered their work, their materials and their workers as pro bono, so for free. Later on, we had funds from the German government through the UNESCO to prop 12 buildings. The ALIPH covered the sheltering of dozens of buildings together with the BHI. I don't know but these were, I think the German Archaeological Institute was funding as well, part of BBHR later on to sustain the efforts. So these were basically the funds, but most of the experts' work, the BHI work, the experts of the BHI, the BBHR, we were all volunteering to do the works. Out of these houses that you have seen, many were restored, but still many need funds for the restoration, because now we are in the middle of an economic crisis. already this crisis started 2 years ago and it's still on, so people are not capable to restore their houses. They are still outside their houses, and funds are being very, very few. I think regarding the funds, maybe Fadlo can talk more about this and about the difficulty to get funds to restore what's left of the buildings, and there are really so many.
Thank you,
Я ще
Natalie. Yes,
хотіла
I would
запитати,
say
у чиїй власності ці будівлі? Чиї будівлі були?
the owners of the buildings are local people. Okay, it's not most of these buildings are not governmental buildings, and that was a major issue in the help that could be provided, because international organization can only intervene in helping on public buildings. They cannot help private owners. Most of the buildings in Beirut, practically more than 95% of the buildings that were hit were privately owned and did not receive any public help from international organization. Now, ALIPH has been very helpful in the propping and sheltering procedures in the early times, just after the blast. However, later on, the funds were obtained through the Lebanese diaspora or local people who were willing to give. And what is essentially important to say is that there was a real huge movement of solidarity. As Natalie was mentioning, all the experts that intervened, architects, restorers, and engineers, did it pro bono without having taking anything. Many contractors helped also by taking discounted prices without any profit on this, just really to be able to react to this catastrophe. So it's mainly a work of solidarity, and this is what is really impressive in this operation in Beirut.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now the floor goes to Anna Opuska, and then we have one question in the chat.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for these three really interesting presentations. Myself, I'm a conservator restorer from Poland, working also in Israel, and I've been following the meetings of this platform for the last few months. I heard a lot of dilemmas and problems shared by our Ukrainian colleagues, and therefore I have actually three questions. The two first questions will refer to the first one that has been asked. First of all, I understand that there is no specific law protecting heritage buildings or new heritage buildings, which is the last 300 years old in Lebanon. But my understanding of the problems of our Ukrainian colleagues is that before they can enter the building and take immediate actions, they struggle with quite complicated bureaucratic procedures and administration decisions. And I wanted to ask you if this was also an issue in Beirut in terms of building law, not heritage protection law. Could you act immediately on protecting, strengthening the structure of the building without the long bureaucratic procedure of getting all the necessary permits? This is first question. Second, referring to what Mr. Fadlala Tager said, I understand that you have a law that protects heritage older than 300 years old. So my understanding is that there is no register of protected buildings. Is there any way the buildings are protected in zoning plans? The buildings which were built after 18th century. And the last question goes to Natalie. I'm really curious, how did it work for you, the whole process in terms of coordination of such a huge group of stakeholders? I understand that the leader was the Antiquities Authority. I'm just curious if it was a smooth process and what kind of coordination and organization issues you had to face. I believe that WhatsApp and social media may be very helpful, but still such a big process with so many people involved needs a very good coordination. So I'm just interested in this aspect. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to answer briefly on your first two questions. With respect to how did we intervene without official authorities approving? You know, it's like when this catastrophe happened, there was no time to ask for any authorization to intervene. This was like the Red Cross coming on, you know, helping people out, taking them to the hospital. And as Michelle and Nathalie mentioned, the Director General of Antiquities was on the ground. The governor of Beirut was on the ground, and they let us work because we had to work, you know. So whenever we needed some authorization, it was given right away by the Director General of Antiquities and the governor of Beirut, because they didn't have all the equipment, they didn't have the resources, the human resources to intervene. So they accepted that the civil society really gave help in this operation, and they facilitated it as much as possible. And it is still the case today, actually. But today we're not anymore in emergency works, we are in restoration works, but it's still facilitated by both departments, the Antiquities and the government of Beirut. With respect to establishing zoning plans for the protected buildings, again, so the buildings that are protected are all the buildings that are built prior to 1700. So for all the modern heritage that is between 1700 and today, there is no mapping, there are no plans except in specific areas in the mountains where some villages are protected, although built partly after this period of 1700. In Beirut, we don't have that. Officially, there are no maps. The Department of Antiquities is checking on those buildings, and of course, any modifications to those buildings should be authorized by the Antiquities, but it's not officially legal. So there's there is a conflict in this because the authorities, the parliament is not taking action to protect heritage, and so the Department of Antiquities is trying to do whatever they can do, but it's not officially very clear legally. The civil society has established maps of those buildings, and we have even proposed to safeguard some areas of Beirut, protect them and implement a protection plan. But there is also here a conflict between the authorities. The Department of Antiquities is totally helping in this process, but other departments are not helping at all and are against this. So the conflicts that exist on the political scene in Lebanon also reflect on the administration, and it's not always easy to be working within this situation. I will leave the floor for Nathalie.
Regarding the coordination, your question about the coordination. Okay, we should not imagine that this was all the people working on the ground and all the NGOs working on the ground were all coordinating with each other. This is not true. But the government assigned the army to control everything. So every NGO who has to work on the ground has to report its work to the army. So everything went through the army. And everybody who wanted to make an intervention on a heritage house had to have permit from the DGA and the governor. But these permits, as Fadlo already mentioned, were given very fast. So all the data was as well received by those two authorities. But to say that there was one coordinating committee for all those 100, let's say more than 100 NGOs, no. Nevertheless, for example, for us as BBHR, we were coordinating with the BHE. We were coordinating with many NGOs. We had more than 300 site visits to control the works of the NGOs working on the ground and to report their work if there was something not really correct. But there was no one committee for all these actors working on the ground. As I said, there was a kind of flexibility, and flexibility is required. But the disadvantage of this flexibility is that things might go out of control. And we had some cases where NGOs intervened in wrong, they applied wrong practices on the houses, but there was another concern. We needed to bring back the people to their house. So we had to find a kind of compromise and to make things flexible and not being very, strict.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have also one question on the charts, actually, that links to the previous question and previous answers, because it links to the cooperation with city authorities or government authorities. Question from Katerina Kublicka. What is the experience of working with municipal services, for example, regarding the analysis of damages and necessary sorting of materials and fragments of buildings? Did they listen to you? The question is, did they even ask you or not? Or did you have any, I mean, it's my addition. Did you have any influence into it or not?
They did not intervene in such details, no. No, not the municipality, and the DGA was counting on BHR team and on the volunteers on the ground to do as much as they can, but no, there was no control.
In
from
fact,
the municipality, I mean.
Yeah, if I can add something just for the municipality, they prepared some list to be assessed and they oriented this work to the DGA, and we got to do this work in their place. So I confirm what Natalie said, that no, they were just like telespectators not more. So
okay,
the technical part was not done by any official part, or an official part of the government or the municipalities. And for the listing of material, sorting of material, it was done privately. Each owner had to do this by himself. And here we confess that many elements were robbed because the situation was not protected. Even the army was present, but a lot of developers, a lot of owners who were willing to destroy these buildings to make contemporary buildings, abuse in this regard. They sell stone blocks, they sell wooden elements. So this was the situation on the ground at this time.
Okay, if I remember the question, okay, Katerina Kubicka, please correct me. In the Ukraine, the situation is actually extremely different. I mean, after the bombing attack, the affected area is just surrounded by.
Чи можу я додати? Я перепрошую дуже. Просто звідки це питання в нас вийшло? З березня, коли були дуже активні бомбардування Харкова, постраждало дуже багато історичних будівель, які у тому числі є зі статусом пам'ятки архітектури, пам'ятки історії, культури та просто цінна історична забудова.
І в нас кейс, інший бік цієї історії, тобто якщо у вас муніципалітети взагалі ніяк не доторкались до розборів завалів, в нас навпаки якраз муніципальні служби після того, як із завалами працювали МНС, після цього їх розбирали одразу комунальні служби і просто все вивозили на полігони зі сміттями. І в нас не було шансів просто зберегти якісь матеріали чи якісь деталі та донорські елементи. Тому це от у перші кілька місяців. І тому насправді дуже, для мене дуже таке кричуще питання взагалі якийсь досвід, як можливо співпрацювати і де знайти цю золоту середину співпраці між професійною спільнотою, яка як волонтери суспільства просто та муніципалітети та влада, як ми можемо всі співпрацювати. І так, звичайно, в нас дуже ускладнюється все тим, що постійно йдуть якісь обстріли, і просто ми не можемо підійти до будівель. Тобто, тому що так, військові контролюють всі процеси, але постійно залишається якась небезпека, що будівля недообстежена, недорозмінована чи ще щось. Але ось, як з точки зору реставрації, збереження та охорони спадщини, якраз ось це таке нагальне питання, це саме досвід співпраці між з фаховою спільнотою та волонтерами та муніципалітетами та владою. Дякую, дуже перепрошую, що вклинулася.
So as I know, Katerina, please correct me, but also even city heritage officers don't have an access to these places after the attack. Katerina, question to you.
Так, після того, як сталася подія, як стався будівлю зруйновано чи пошкоджено, до неї мають підход тільки фахівці з надзвичайних ситуацій та сапери, тобто ми не можемо до неї підійти. А потім, момент, коли вже дозволяють підійти фахівцям з охорони, завали просто майже вже розібрані. Тобто, є в нас така проблема. Є декілька об'єктів, які зуміли на місці фахівці відстояти, та в нас йде дуже такі запеклі дебати із міською владою щодо того, що не можна просто так підходити до старовинних будівель. Тобто ми вже не кажемо пам'ятка, не пам'ятка, просто ось є старовинна будівля, не треба її одразу розбирати.
Okay. The next question goes to Maria Zadorожna. Maria, floor is yours.
Дорогі колеги, я Марія Задорожна, і я мовлю з Києва. Я є представницею професійної ініціативи Heritage Rescue Initiative. І я хочу вам дуже подякувати за як і доповідачам, так і організаторам цього семінару через те, що ті знання і досвід, який зараз яким ділитеся ви з нами, він насправді для нас безцінний. І я дуже сподіваюся, що це буде не остання наша контакт, або якась професійна розмова на ті теми, які є близькими для нас. В мене є питання таке, точніше, один коментар і потім питання. Справа в тім, що я хочу продовжити слова Катерини, пані Катерини, що дійсно нам не вдається зараз бути проактивними в тому, щоб дійсно в стабілізаційних заходах якихось, а тим більше, наприклад, на об'єктах культурної спадщини, а тим більше там в реставрації і відновленні за різних причин. Через те ми більше сфокусовані зараз на документації втрат культурної спадщини, наприклад, наша ініціатива, і ми займаємося тим вже більше ніж 6 місяців. Документуємо втрати ми в першу чергу, безумовно, для того, щоб далі мати можливість фахово стабілізувати об'єкти, які пошкоджені, а далі реставрувати, відновлювати і таке інше. Це перша мета. Друга мета, з якою ми документуємо, це є кримінальні кейси. Через те, що ми, в принципі, маємо таку амбіцію потім представляти інтереси України в міжнародних судах. Отже, моє питання буде наступне зараз до колег. Я в презентаціях почула про те, що ви теж документували, і що це важливий процес. І в мене питання таке, які форми ви взяли за основу? Через те, що з однієї інформації, з однієї презентації я зрозуміла, що це була форма для документування, яка була розроблена вами в процесі. Потім я почула про те, що ви працювали з ікромом, і, можливо, в мене є таке думка, що це, можливо, ікромівські форми. Це перше питання. Які форми саме для документування ви використовували? І друге моє питання в тому, що, наприклад, якщо б ви повернулися назад і, в принципі, у вас би була можливість ще раз задокументувати якісь об'єкти, да, які ви документували одразу після вибуху, наприклад, або пошкодження, що би ви порадили нам врахувати зараз, коли ми документуємо? Я б була дуже вдячна вам за те, щоб ви сказали, от при документуванні дуже важливо не забути це або зробити оце. Це для нас було б теж зараз дуже важливим. Дякую.
Michelle, you want to talk about the assessment because she mentioned the data sheets.
In fact, yes. This data sheet or the assessment form, in fact, was based on scientific literature for similar cases, but we developed it to fit the Beiruti houses model. So it was like a form taking into account, like in the structural side, the typology of the structural system, the typology of the house, the number of floors, the typology of damages, and so on. So this form maybe it can be useful for you, and we can share it with you also. And also the typology of damages, we can share all of these documents with you. However, I confirm that also you as Ukrainian team, you should adopt and develop and like to fit your system, your built heritage. So this is in what is related to these assessment forms, and here I need to mention that there was two kind of assessment forms, one on the architectural side and one on the structural side. So this was really important for the documentation first and for the assessment also. And for the documentation, Natalie will continue about this, but also we used new technologies like photogrammetries and so on. So Natalie, the floor is yours to continue about that.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So in addition to the structural assessment and the architectural assessment, there was a team working on documenting the 3D models of the houses with drones and photogrammetry. because some of the houses we were not able to access them because they were very endangered structures. So the drone was something useful, especially for the roofs, to assess the, the timber roof. The drone was very practical, to have pictures from up, to assess the situation, and then to have an idea on how to make intervention, 1. 2, to document the situation after the blast, because we needed to have to know how the houses were, what was the condition of the houses right after the blast, for the archiving, let's say, case, and for the documentation. And later on, the UNESCO funded a project with Econem. I don't know if you know them, the Econem. They make 3D mapping of cities after crisis, like they did Mosul, they did Aleppo, and they did Palmyra, I think, in Syria, and they did Beirut. So more than 60,000 images project to make the 3D mapping of the whole affected area by the blast was done under UNESCO later on. And to your question, what should we focus on? Well, I would say I would have preferred to have those documentation before the blast, because now with the reconstruction, we are facing issues. We don't know how the houses looked like, how the windows details were, because there was no documentation of the city before the blast. With the Second World War, some of the European countries did, like Germany, they did documentation before the Second World War, and this helped them a lot with the reconstruction after the war. But for us, we didn't have this. Beirut is a 7,000 years old city that didn't have a map or photos or any documents for the houses. So I wish we had this before the blast.
Sorry, I need to add something, Natalie, that in the documentation unit, this documentation unit was like a bank of photos. Okay, even some private photos from local owners were added to this documentation unit. So because of this lack of an official documentation of the Beirut city, we were obliged to search for any photos or like any document showing us how was, for example, how the house looked like before the blast. In some cases, we succeeded to have this kind of photos and documentations, but in many cases, we were in lack to find a few documents about this.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else?
Michał, if I may ask a question.
Of course, Maya.
So this is a question. Thank you so very much for this really good discussion. And the question is, it's not really a question, it's just a request to colleagues from Beirut, to Natalie, Michelle. I think Fadlo had to leave, but maybe David can also speak to that. And the question is about the lack of electricity. This is something that is very heavily on our minds today. Many colleagues from Ukraine couldn't join because of that. So can you tell us a little bit, how did you work around this? Any solutions you implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. So I will start first. I will share my experience working inside a public institution, particularly in the context of preservation of artifacts of the National Museum. So the challenge was big there because the museum was designed to host visitors, and it was hosted. It was designed to function as a whole unit from the power supply point of view. So the challenge was because in the reserves and in the museum itself, there are artifacts or objects whether they are, we have mummies, we have textile, metal objects that need particular conditions, climatic conditions, and that was very, very hard, especially that after the explosion happened in August, so it's the hot and humid season, and the power supply was even more compromised. We already suffer from power cuts, but it was even more compromised because of the generators working and supplying the museum with the power and the electrical power were not functioning at the best efficiency. So the challenge was how to redesign in very quick manner the electrical supply of the museum and the reserves, so that it functions as an intensive care unit, focusing on the most delicate and most vulnerable objects, to make sure at least that whatever happens, the temperature will not go higher than a certain maximum, and same for the humidity. So we needed to act very fast. Also here, I can give the experience of how ALIPH was also providing support to the National Museum by giving providing the necessary equipment when it comes to dehumidifiers and mobile air conditioning units. So yes, the challenge is how to customize the needs, the power needs of certain buildings that need to be operational 24 hours from an electrical point of view. I will leave the floor to my colleagues, maybe to talk about the management of the crisis and the restoration of buildings, but I like to present this parentheses of the challenges we were facing in a specific and specialized area of cultural heritage.
We talk about electricity. In fact, I think.
Sorry, Natalie. Maybe you have to tell them that we pay two invoices for electricity, one for the government and another one for the private generators.
Yes, this is, I think the problem of electricity, we have it since long time ago. So I think we started finding solutions since the 80s, late 80s. I remember we stayed 6 months without electricity when we were under the Syrian bombing. So everybody got generators, small generators, and later on, you know, there was one big generator for the neighborhood that gives electricity to the neighborhood whenever there is no electricity. This is why since then we pay 2 invoices, one for the public electricity and one for the private electricity. And then later on, since 1 year or 2 years ago, there's no fuel anymore. So even the private generators are not functioning properly. So we don't have electricity all the time. So now we started installing solar panels as an alternative. So we have 3 invoices now, one for the solar panel, one for the generator, and one for the public electricity. And we don't have electricity all the time. So I think this problem maybe is new to Ukrainian colleagues, but for us, we've been dealing with this problem since the 80s. So we are used to find alternative solutions. And we try, for example, with the internet, we buy UPS for the router that gives the internet. So whenever there's no electricity, we still have internet for 2 hours. These are solutions that we deal with every day. And we don't have water, so we have public water and private water. So we are all in a surviving mode.
So to brief, we are having our own government in each house. So we have to ensure our water, our electricity, and so on. So maybe it's also an experience to share with the Ukrainian local partners or people because really we are used to this kind of situation. So now the PV system, the photovoltaic system are trendy in Lebanon. The private generators were like something that we got used to. Huh? It is not like something unusual. Well, this was the situation. It is still happening now, maybe worse. And but we don't know on the Ukrainian level also what could we do in this regard. Maybe the idea is a bit strange to have like local generators for like 6 or 7 or 10 like buildings together to make this kind of auto like having their own generators or like have their own electricity. So you should be like used to this kind of situation because of the war. Because here we got used to this since we had the 1975 war in Lebanon. Until now, because of the corruption, there is no electricity. It was like more than $40 billion spent on developing the electricity sector. And today we have
still no electricity.
1 hour or 0 hour per day of electricity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grigory Yurievich Lysenko.
Hello, guys. I'm an architect from Ukraine. Thank you for a very interesting speech and very useful things which you're doing. And I think something of those we will do the same going your way. I have a question to you. Why you don't use the solar panels? Because you are in so nice for the solar electricity. I think you don't need generators. You need only the batteries and the solar panels. It's more useful. And with a lot of days sunny in Livan, you don't have any problems with electricity and don't need the government anymore because you will have free electricity from the sun.
We never needed them anyway.
Because
but this is,
now
as Michelle said, yeah, sorry.
Now in Ukraine we use it, and even here I don't know, can you see it or not? Now it's very cloudy and the snow is falling, so it's near zero. Sometimes we have extremely cold weather, is minus 20, 30 below zero, but even in such conditions, the solar panel works to 10-15% of the full power, and for the light and the freezer, it's more than enough. So for the internet, so I think for your country is a very good solution if you have such nice society which communicate together and can resolve the problems close to each other. It will be like a decision to the end of the time. You put and you forget about this problem.
Forget.
Thank you, guys.
Right.
Thank you.
So basically, this is what Michelle said, that this is now everybody is installing now the solar panels. Even the streets are being lit with NGOs with the solar system. So yes, we're adapting this. It's since 1 year now, this is what we've been installing, but it's still expensive, so it's not affordable by everyone. So I think that's the main problem.
Yes, that's the main problem, especially that you have a lot of variety of panels, solar panels types and batteries, the lithium, the acid. So the market is still in a chaos now. You need really to choose a good brand and a good like supplier, and you have to install it well, because since 1 year a lot of people did this, but I can also confirm that a lot of people had many problems in this regard. So it's a bit expensive. Till now it is expensive. If you look the cost of the installations and materials and all of that. But on the personal level, I did it, but I made like a study for 2-3 months to know about the system, about the new technology. Is it worth to do it? Is it effective, financially effective or not? So yes, this is now the situation, and many people are doing this.
Yeah.
It's not hard work. You can make like a video for the internet. It's not really difficult to understand how to do it. I don't know how international shops working in Levan, but for Chinese internet shops, like a lot of them are working, and you can make like the video to teach the people. They need the batteries, they need the solar panel, and they need the transducer from 12 volts and to 220, and make links and make like a video instructions, something the same as you show us in presentation about the constructions, and you can resolve. So everybody can buy and by itself make it, and they will use. So of course, if to every people go to by itself in this new way, because it's something new for like for humanity, and yes, not engineers that are located on this problem. But if you will make some simple video for 20 minutes or half an hour, and everybody can watch it and can make it. Also, if you install it in your house, you can make a video by your phone and show to the guys how it works, and your experience of the how much it costs. And because we calculate that only for 2 years, it's the price of the solar panels in Ukraine. Like if you will buy the fuel for your generator, and the generator even can work without the panels, with the batteries, because I say that we didn't have enough sun every day, half a year, to the works of the panels. But even if you use the batteries with the generator, and it can work 2 hours, but not 24 hours to give you electricity, it's the effect for the money is for 1.5 or 2 years, you've completely like give your money back from the system. So
yes, but it is not the case in Lebanon. The case in the case in Lebanon is like about 8 to 10 years to get your money back in the current situation.
The economic situation. We can people cannot take their money as well from the bank. It's they are in the bank, frozen, and people cannot withdraw their money from the bank. So we're in a very difficult economic situation. So it's not that easy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is a very interesting discussion, and maybe there is some, maybe we'll find some way to exchange these experiences, practical solutions.
I don't see any more questions. Is there anyone still who wants to ask something? If not, I have to ask our dear guests to, if of course, if it's possible, to share with your presentations with our Ukrainian partners. And if it's possible, the question goes to Maya. Can it be shared also by you? Can we transfer them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So everyone who wants to receive this this presentation, just please give us a sign, write an email, or maybe just write on the chat, and we will send it to you.
Ja dodam, sorry, linguistic confusion here for a moment. I will add an email, our general email. for everyone in the chat, so that if you have any questions to our colleagues from Beirut, you can email your question. You can email them to the chat. To this email address, and we will pass them on to our colleagues. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty, but I will.
Okay, so maybe I ask. Okay, that's a general email from you. I will also give email from House of Reconstruction, but please write it first on the ALIPH Foundation. Okay, so I think it was a very fruitful discussion and a very fruitful meeting seminar. Maybe we can treat it as a beginning of a bigger cooperation. I hope that our Ukrainian partners can take some thoughts or maybe some solution from your side and use it in Ukraine, in spite of different circumstances and different cooperation with local authorities. But certainly, yeah, it should be useful. And I also have to, from my side, have to say that I'm absolutely impressed with your work. What have you done after this explosion? In your own, actually. So, despite the chaotic situation, you've organized a really great system, and I'm absolutely impressed. So, thanks to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the translation team also.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, our translator. It was really great to have you on board with us.
And Michał, thank you very much to you and your team for hosting us. And once again, big thanks to
Zodiac, and to Zodiac, which is our group of department architecture who actually owns this platform. So thank you guys from Zodiac.
Ну, я з українського боку дозволю собі подякувати всім організаторам Бейруту з Варшави, від Аліфу і всім українським учасникам. Дякуємо, нам це дійсно було дуже потрібно. І за вашу підтримку, за те, що кожен з вас почав свою доповідь зі слів, як ви підтримуєте нас.
So thanks. I wish you a good day and a calm weekend without any missiles. I hope so. Especially these are wishes to our Ukrainian friends and to all of you. If we want to see each other, good Christmas and a better New Year.
May it bring peace in Ukraine.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so very much. Thank you. Bye.